Welcome to the Addiction Connection podcast, connecting the hope of the gospel with the heart of addiction. I'm your host, Mark Shaw, and today's topic is Ben Roethlisberger, the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback. In the news, it was a little over a week or so ago, Ben Roethlisberger, the Steelers quarterback who was injured last year but was planning a comeback, he did a Christian virtual conference event in Pittsburgh. And it's interesting, he talked about, well, I'll just read a quote. He said this: people don't realize all the time that us athletes, we're human. We sin like everybody else. I am no different. We make mistakes. We get addicted to things. We sin. And I love that. I want to stop right there. He goes on to say, we're human. I think sometimes we get put on this pedestal where we can't make mistakes. I've fallen as short as anybody. I've been addicted to alcohol. I've been addicted to pornography, which makes me then not the best husband, not the best father, and not the best Christian I can be. But you have to dedicate yourself and understand that you can get out of it because of the grace of God and Him saying, listen, you're good enough for me the way you are. You don't have to be perfect. So this Man Up Pittsburgh event, hosted annually by the Urban Impact in connection with the Steelers head coach, Mike Tomlin, who professes to be a believer as well. This event is where Ben Roethlisberger made this admission, and it was reported upon. It was on June 23rd, 2020, so not very long ago. And here Ben Roethlisberger is confessing this, and it made the ESPN news. I saw it on CBS Sports, but I didn't see it really beyond those platforms and not in much depth. And it got me thinking, here is a guy who is well known for what he's accomplished on the football field, winning Super Bowls. I watched him in college when he played in 2001, 2, and 3 for Miami of Ohio. And then to see him get drafted 11th by the Pittsburgh Steelers, become a Super Bowl quarterback. I've always heard of some off-season problems for him, but now hearing that he's doing well, or at least confessing this, from my perspective, he's doing very well. To say these kinds of things the way he said them is wonderful. And I think about Proverbs 22, verse 1, which says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. And I think about Ben Roethlisberger confessing this. In some sense, it's not a good name that he is getting here when he confesses something like this, at least not to a lot of people. But in God's eyes, what he's doing is very pleasing to God. And I think bringing up an issue, well, two issues really, alcohol addiction, as he calls it, and pornography as an addiction. He brings them up in the same breath. I've been addicted to pornography. These are issues that men struggle with everywhere. And so here's a guy who's saying he's a Christian. God is helping him. You've got to dedicate yourself. So he's taking responsibility to then make the right choices and understand that it's the grace of God. What a wonderful message to people, that the grace of God helps you to battle and overcome your addiction, but that you're human. You sin. And he wasn't calling it a disease, but a sin issue in his own heart. And as I read these articles, I was struck by the message that we teach at the Addiction Connection, which is the addiction is not a disease, it's a sin issue, and that everyone, Christian or not, can struggle with this very issue, and that you don't have to hide it or be ashamed in one sense. You have to confess it, bring it to light. It is shameful many times what people do when they're addicted and the choices they make and that they made even before getting there. But that Jesus forgives us of that. And so it takes away the guilt and the shame in that sense. So you don't have to continue to be ashamed for what you've done in the past. You confess it, you ask Jesus to forgive you, and he does so because that's the gospel message. He does so because of his goodness and God's plan and the atoning blood of Jesus Christ. And so Roethlisberger goes on to say, now more than ever, it's cool to be a Christian, especially professional athletes. And he says that he wants to tell people, I can be a really good athlete and a Christian. It's not like they are opposed to each other. You can do both. Well, we've known that for years with Tim Tebow and different believers who've come out about their faith. And quarterbacks, I think about the Philadelphia Eagles quarterbacks with Carson Wentz and the other guy, I can't think of Foles, who I know my Philadelphia listeners right now are cringing that I couldn't remember Nick Foles' name, but these guys have come out about their faith and many others, and I love to hear that. I love to see that. That guys are talking about their faith and that it is cool. Ben's right. In a lot of ways, it's cool to be a Christian, but are you really a dedicated Christian? Are you someone who really wants to serve God? And it sounds like Ben Roethlisberger, I don't know, and the article gave us very little information. I don't know how serious of a Christian he is, but about what he said and what I read, I was super encouraged by what he said in these articles and how he was quoted. It was a breath of fresh air. Even as a professional quarterback, he was twice accused of sexual assault. He was suspended in 2010 for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy. So this is a guy who has struggled with his flesh for many years, and yet he is learning to become selfless rather than selfish and not take his celebrity, his superstar status, and all of that for granted. And of course, he's at the end of his career. Quite likely, he may not ever play again. He's had some serious injuries, and he's not a young man by football standards. I think he's young because he's younger than me, but he's not a young guy considering football players and how many years they play. I mean, here's a guy who played college football. His last season was in 2003. We are now in 2020, so he's had a 16, 17-year football career. So Ben is recognizing that. He's married and trying to live a life that sounds like he's trying to be a Christian. So, again, I was encouraged by what he said. Something else he said was again, I got superbly excited about this. He said, last year we went through a crazy offseason. All I thought about was getting back on the football field. And I was like, God, you're going to give me all this redemption. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to prove everybody wrong. I'm going to win a Super Bowl, and we're going to give you all the glory, and this is it. This is my comeback year. And the second game, I tear my elbow, and that was God being like, hold on, it's not your plan of coming back. It's got to be my plan. So I had to pump the brakes. And those are the wake-up calls that God gives us to say, hold on now, don't be selfish and do it on your time. We're doing it on my time. And he's quoting God there in a way. So what he's saying was, hey, I was fired up. I thought this is the way I'm going to give God glory. I'm going to come back. I'm going to play great. We're going to win the Super Bowl, and we're going to just say, to God be the glory. But God had a different plan, is what he's saying. And he's learning to embrace suffering. The injury wasn't his fault, wasn't anyone's fault. It's an injury that happens often in football, and it took him out for the year. And so his thoughts of how he was going to glorify God were derailed by what God had planned. And I think about that a lot because oftentimes we think, I'm going to go on a missions trip and I'm going to glorify God. And you go on that trip and you come back and you go, wow, God taught me far more than I shared and taught those people that I went to share with on this mission field. And God did a work in your heart as a missionary, as someone who does short-term missions at times. I hope that you do that. God will teach you a whole lot more on those missions trips than even you take to the people that you're serving. And we just think, okay, this is going to fit in this way. I'm going to glorify God. I'm going to do this. And really, God has different plans altogether, which gives me great hope when I think about all the things that I planned that didn't go well, but that God used redemptively and brought good from it. So I would say, be encouraged. If you've struggled with a drug addiction in your life, God's going to use that if you will confess it as sin, forsake it in your actions, and now live a life to glorify Him. He'll use your addictive choices of the past to be something that helps and blesses people today and encourages their hearts to serve God and to live for Him. And God can use you. You are not someone who is to be cast off or thrown away. In fact, we need you in the local church. If you struggle with an addiction and you're now living for Christ, not perfectly, but you've been like Ben Roethlisberger, I can't say his name. You're like him, and you're now living in a different way and understanding that your life has value and meaning beyond what the world would say it does. You can use your life now to glorify God. And here's what Ben said at the very end of this article. He said, "I'm so thankful that this injury happened during my walk that I'm in now." Isn't that powerful to think about? He's not glad for the injury, that's suffering, but he's glad that the timing of it, that it happened while he's in his walk. And that's Christianese language for he's walking with God. And so he's saying, now that I'm in a different place, I'm maturing, I'm walking with God, this injury happened, and I'm glad it happened at this time. And he goes on to say, I don't know that I would have been able to handle it a few years ago, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. I know that my faith would have been as strong. Now that I know what it's about, it's easy to say, hey, God, this is in your hands. I'm going to go train my butt off, those are his words, to get back out there, and whatever you have for me, I'm ready. So that is a very different mindset than what the Ben Roethlisberger would have had, of old would have had he been injured a few years ago, he says. So I love that he's saying, Lord, I'm going to put this in your hands. It's in your hands anyway. I'm making sure that I'm reminding myself that it's in your hands, Lord, and I'm going to train, work hard, get back out there, and do everything I can to play football, but I'm going to trust you. And I know that I can trust you because you are faithful. And Ben has seen God's faithfulness in his life. So what a blessing to read this. I mean, whether you're a Steelers fan or a Bengals fan or a Browns fan or a Ravens fan, I think if you're a believer, you can celebrate that God appears to have done something very substantial in Ben Roethlisberger's life, that he is now maturing and growing as a husband and a father and as a Christian. We want to pray for him and know that God is all over his life now from, according to this article, and I don't know him personally, but would love to meet him. I personally root for the Steelers from time to time. I know my Bengals fans, friends, and Browns friends, and Ravens friends won't like to hear that, but I root for the guy on the football field, but now I can root for the guy even more so as a person, and we should anyway. But it is nice to see this, nice to see it in the news, and it wasn't really promoted a lot. I read it, I read a couple things, and then people just kind of let this newsworthy story go. So I wanted to bring it back to light in this podcast and encourage you to think about the athletes and the people that we put on pedestals. They're human. They sin, as Ben Roethlisberger said. They make mistakes. They make wrong choices. But we can pray for them. We can pray that God would save them and use them for his glory as he sees fit. It might not be winning a Super Bowl. It might be in the quiet moments of life where they're showing God their faithfulness to God, and especially his faithfulness to them. And I think about now the good reputation that Ben Roethlisberger has, according to Proverbs 22, verse 1. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. And based on what I've read here, it sounds as though Ben Roethlisberger is finding favor with God as he seeks to turn his life over to God and let God be glorified in him as he works out his life with fear and trembling. We can pray for Ben Roethlisberger. We can rejoice with him that God is apparently doing a great work in this man's heart. Thanks for joining me today. Join us next time on the Addiction Connection podcast. God bless you and take care.